Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Beyond Pricing session. Pleased to be joined today by Jess and Jessie from Beyond Pricing, who are going to lead us through setting things up and answer all your questions along the way. And I'm here as well to answer any SuperControl specific questions that come up. So before I hand over to the Beyond Pricing team, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom. If you could use that, if you have any questions along the way, we'll try and answer them as we go. And so just type in your questions and we'll respond as and when we can. We won't necessarily wait till right at the end to do that. So just ask away. So, Jess, I think you're going to take the lead from here. So thank you for your time today. We've got 40, 50 people on today, all eager to learn how we can get on board with Beyond Pricing.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert, and welcome to everyone who's here today. I'm really excited to be here. As Robert mentioned, my name is Jess, and I'm the Director of Customer Experience for EMEA for Beyond Pricing. I'm originally from Australia and have lived in San Francisco for 10 years, and I'm now in Lisbon. So please excuse my accent as it dips in and out of various influences from over the years. But yeah, I've been with Beyond Pricing for several years now and always focused on the customer. And I'm really excited to work with SuperControl users to show you how you can leverage dynamic pricing in general and Beyond Pricing in particular. So I'm going to share my screen. So let's jump right in and talk about what we can expect from the session today. So first of all, I just want to cover quickly dynamic pricing and sort of how the general concept works and why we have built what we have built at Beyond Pricing. And then we're going to jump into an account and see dynamic pricing in action. And we're going to go through from the very beginning to the end, like connecting your SuperControl account to see how easy it is to getting up and running with the tool. I know for a lot of people, dynamic pricing can be scary. It feels like you're giving up a lot of control. So then we're going to focus on the different levers you can pull to maintain control in the tool. And then throughout, I'm going to address common questions. And then we'll also leave some time for questions at the end. But as Robert mentioned, please feel free to ask throughout and we'll try and address them in the moment. And a big thank you to everyone who's already sent through questions too. So if you're here, you probably know a little bit about dynamic pricing, but I just wanted to give a quick overview of how we approach it at Beyond Pricing. So at Beyond Pricing, we specialize, we specialize in dynamic pricing, which is essentially changing the price based on changes in supply and demand that we see in the market. So you've probably experienced this in regular times, hopefully when booking a flight, for example. To fly at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday is usually cheaper than 5 p.m. on a Friday as people are getting ready to go away for the weekend. So the same thing happens with shortlets, which I don't have to tell this group. I'm sure you have some sort of variable pricing between weekdays and weekends, high and low season. So what we really want to do at Beyond Pricing is make that easy for you. And then another level of value that we add is helping deal with the unexpected, which is something that we're all accustomed to after the year that we've had. So at Beyond Pricing, what we'll do is look at over 5 billion data points daily from a variety of sources, including Airbnb, Vrbo, Expedia, Booking.com, and we'll look at the trends that we see around the world based on these data points. And then we'll take this information and run it through the algorithm and use it to help increase revenue by increasing pricing for high demand dates, such as bank holiday weekends, for example, and then helping increase occupancy for low demand dates. The great thing about Beyond Pricing is it's really clean and simple and easy to use. And we also have the largest data science and revenue management team in the industry. And this is important always, but especially now as we understand where the trends are aligning with what we've seen in the past and where they're deviating. And especially to understand, are we heading back towards 2019, 2018 patterns? Are we entering a whole new environment in 2021 and on? So our revenue management team and data science analysts focus on this. And on that note, they hand launch each hyperlocal market to ensure that your pricing adjusts automatically to reflect changes in your local area. So as well as the pricing, we also surface a lot of the market data and insights that we use to feed into the algorithm. We surface them in the tool so that you can have access to this information on a listing level, a portfolio level if you have more than one property, and then a market level. And then last but not least, our world-class support team. You know, we're here for our customers. We're very customer-centric, and we have a great dedicated 24-hour support team who are always here to help. I can see some questions have come in. Robert, are you taking a look at those?
Yeah, I am. I know that one question we will definitely be talking, which is just generally about pricing strategy and the concern about prices being too high. And another one I'm looking into right at this very moment. So
okay.
We may be able to answer that. So yeah, but I will keep an eye on the questions that are coming in.
Perfect, thank you. Great. Well, let's jump in and get started. So I'm actually going to drop out of presentation mode, but I just wanted to share what we're going to look at first here. So we're going to see how easy it is to connect a SuperControl account. And then I'm going to take you on a journey kind of around Beyond Pricing and how to navigate, and then really look at the calendar so we can see the prices, you know, how far out we suggest prices, how we change these prices, and what that looks like. So on that note, let's jump on in. Okay, great. So this is my favorite account. The user is We Love SuperControl at beyondpricing.com, because we do. But today we have a demo account connected, but we're going to go ahead and link our SuperControl account. So if we click on link another account here and click on SuperControl, and what we need here is our SuperControl client key. So I have my SuperControl account here open. And of course it forgot the password. Sorry. One moment, it logged me out. Just going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. Apologies, everyone.
So while Jess is doing that, you will go into your SuperControl account under the integrations menu and pricing tools, and then Beyond Pricing menu. And there's a key. You need to enable your properties, and there's a key which you will see paste into your Beyond Pricing account, and it links things up very quickly and easily. Have you managed to get into that?
Yes, I have. I'm sorry. This is a great indication of how secure SuperControl is. It logged me out in the time that I logged in getting ready for this webinar. So yeah, to Robert's point, if we go to integrations, price optimization, Beyond Pricing, and then what I'm going to do here is grab my key.
So just while you're doing that, you see there's a button there saying enabled. The bottom button isn't enabled. So if I wanted to push through Woodland Retreat as well, then you would need to enable that property too. So before you add this key into Beyond Pricing, make sure you've got at least one property enabled.
Great tip. So I'm going to go here and paste my key in. And now we're connecting our SuperControl account. Just going to remove this one, so it's cleaner to see what's happening. Okay. Today is not my day. Robert, one moment.
Jesse, maybe there's a question come in about sort of comparing, in this case, cottages.com dynamic pricing with your dynamic pricing. And people have had other experiences with Airbnb, for example, and their dynamic pricing. And maybe you could just talk to some of the differences on Beyond Pricing, which is in the interests of the property manager or property owner, and others which may not be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's fundamental to what Beyond Pricing does. And so we set up a product to help property managers and property owners. And something that's interesting about, whether it's cottages or Airbnb, they're managing a two-sided market, and that they need to keep both the guest and the owner or the property manager happy. And so they'll try to find that happy medium while maximizing their own revenue. And the fastest way to maximize revenue is to have every single night booked out indefinitely. And so, as we know, revenue management, it's not always the best thing to have every single night booked out at the lowest possible rate, as you all know. And so you need to find where the market equilibrium pricing is, and then figure out what the right occupancy is given that pricing curve. And so as we look to price a property, we try to find the right price and then wait for the market to catch up. Whereas some of the OTAs like cottages or Airbnb, they'll tend to lean towards just booking it up and having 100% occupancy and making as much revenue as they possibly can. So yeah, we skew more towards the property owners and the property managers.
Yeah, and Sandra, I hope that answers your question there, because it is a completely different experience to what you might have seen previously with cottages.com, or those of you that have tried Airbnb dynamic pricing, which drives prices down and the bookings up. This is a really different, it is not a comparable product. So you've managed to get back in, Jess. Well done.
Yes, apologies there. It is really straightforward. You just copy the key and click connect, and now you can see here it's pulled through my additional SuperControl properties into my account. So before we jump in and look at one individual listing, I just wanted to show you a couple tips and tricks within Beyond Pricing. First of all, set your English to UK on the side here. This will really help with date ranges and the way the calendars are displayed. So if it's coming up as US, I encourage you to set it to UK. And then here, load stats. I think if you always get into the habit of loading the stats each time you log in to Beyond Pricing, this means that all this information here that you see will be accurate and up to date. If you click on your user profile here, this is where you can access some of the general settings for your account. And now I already have some bookings on this, but this is also where before you start syncing, you'll be able to switch the currency from USD to pounds or euros. So highly recommend coming in here too and making that change when you first get started.
While you're in that billing section, there's a couple of questions about pricing, which you may as well cover at this stage of the presentation. So can you explain what the fees are for Beyond Pricing?
Yeah, sure thing. So at Beyond Pricing, we charge 1% of the booking fee. So for every booking that we help price, we charge 1%. And so we charge this at the time of booking. So that's when our price is used and our product is utilized. And then if there are any cancellations or adjustments to a booking, we will credit back for those. So we don't have any on here today, but you can see that for a booking here, this is the fee that's charged. We also offer a 1-month free trial when you get up and running, so you can test it out and see kind of what your bill would be if you were to continue using Beyond Pricing.
And it's important to note that all of the stuff that we're going to do today, until the moment that you click the button to synchronize prices, so you can pull your properties through to Beyond Pricing and you can see the pricing, configure things, so you can get a feel for it without overwriting any prices in SuperControl or incurring any costs.
Definitely, and that's really key. And you can see here, like there's a prompt to start pricing now, but to Robert's point, price posting is off for all of these properties. And so we can go in and play around with them. And let's log into one now for a moment just to take a look. And it'll be very obvious, like when you're ready to start pricing, you have this big kind of green start pricing button. So you can make all sorts of changes and take a look at what is in here before you take that leap. And actually on that note, because you've connected your SuperControl account, the cool thing is we pull through information on current bookings from your SuperControl account. So this is what I'm going to show you now as we take a look at the calendar. It's sort of what the different colors mean and what we can see here. So here we can see a successful booking that we already have on the books. So on that note, back to what we charge on, if you already have any reservations in place, We won't charge on those. You worked hard for those. So it's for any reservation that's received once syncing is enabled. So here in green, you can see any successful reservations that exist in the system, and you can see the reservation total, and then also broken down by average daily rate. You'll hear us talk about this a lot. I know at SuperControl, we tend to talk a lot about weekly pricing. At Beyond Pricing, we tend to talk a lot about daily pricing, and then look at this average daily rate that we get for a week-long booking, for example. So that's what you can see here. And then here you can see this price. The color of this, before I hover over it, is kind of like a lighter green or a lighter teal. And that's because this is coming under our base price here. So if we think about the base price as being the average price that you charge throughout the year, and so sometimes we'll go above it and sometimes we'll go below it. And so visually you can see this on the calendar by any dates that are kind of this light teal color are going below this base price. And then as we scroll down here, you can see this price here is a little bit darker, and this is because it's above our base price. And then you can also see a block here displayed on the calendar. So if I hover back over here, you can see, okay, so with a base price of £143, how do we get to a suggested price of £163? So what we do here is we take the base price and then we look at the common elements or the most significant elements that have an impact on pricing. So here we're looking at seasonality. There's a slight decrease for seasonality because this is late April, early May, sort of as we come into the summertime. We're increasing because it's the early May bank holiday weekend. And then we're also increasing rates because it's a Friday. So traditionally we see higher levels of demand on a Friday or Saturday in most markets than other days. And so we adjust the pricing for that. And so this is how we land in our predicted price of £163 based on the base price. So if we were to change this base price, for example, even if we just increase it by £7, you can now see that the suggested price for this day has increased to £172. So we're starting with the same base and applying the factors, and they just have a subtle impact on the overall nightly price. So when we're talking about control of what your pricing looks like, the base price is the best place to start to sort of have ultimate control over what your pricing will be.
What advice would you have on setting that base price? I know it pulls some data through directly from SuperControl, but a lot of people are, they know their property, they know the location, they know what's special with the value of their property. So the base price is in their control. How should they think about setting that, and perhaps when should they be thinking about adjusting it up or down if over time?
Great question. So I'll answer that in a couple of ways. The first way I like to do it is to look at a key date. So like a bank holiday weekend, for example, although this is already booked, let's pick a different time. We're in Loch Ness, let's go to the marathon. So if traditionally in the past, you have booked out the place for, let's say, £250 or £250 a night for a short break over the marathon weekend, then I would take a look here and see at our current base price, what are we suggesting for these dates? Is it 50% higher than you've been accustomed to in the past? In that case, the base price might be a little bit too high. I like to look at the high demand dates and make sure that the pricing is at least above or in line with what you expect for these key high demand dates. Another thing I like to do too is go to like maybe low season, for example. And if you click into the calendar and drag over 7 nights back to that concept of the weekly price, here we can see, even though this is shown in the nightly price, here we can see that if someone were to stay for that week in November, which is our low season, based on Beyond Pricing's current suggested pricing, it would be a weekly rate of $768. Is that in line with what you've charged in the past? Is it significantly higher or lower? So I like to look at it in respect to what I have charged previously to get a benchmark of where to start. And then we can sort of bounce up and down and go a little bit higher at sometimes and a little bit lower sometimes. And we can put other factors in place to prevent it from going too high or too low. But that's how I like to initially set a base price. Another great place, actually, I'm just going to show you one more thing here. On that note, if you looked at this and said, actually, you know what, 768 is too low for this particular week. I know that there's something going on, or I'm accustomed to raising my rates for this week. You can manually override dates by selecting them. And then here you can set the price, let's say a minimum of £200. So what this will do is it will lock in these prices. You can see it is shown in orange. And then here you can see that we've manually raised the rates to £200 a night for these dates. So you have full control here. You will note that if there are shifts in our suggested pricing based on shifts in demand that we see in the market, these prices won't change. But if you hover over it, you can see what it's currently set at and then the predicted price down the bottom. And then as far as back to setting the base price too, Robert, the next place I like to look after the calendar is the chart tab. And so here, what we can see is we get a ballpark view of the next 365 days, what our suggested pricing would be. And so interestingly here, you can see that it's raised it to our manual override of £200. So you can see this here. But this is a great way too to see, okay, so we're looking at, here we're looking at the marathon. Let's take a look at Christmas, for example. Okay, so at our current base price, it's showing a nightly rate of £193. That sounds a little bit low. Let's bump this back up to 155 as we were experimenting with before. And now we can see the new daily suggested price for Christmas is 208. So I like to take a look in the calendar first to see some key dates, and then come here and sort of get a bird's eye view of the whole 365 days to see what the suggested price would be.
Yeah, I find that view very useful also, looking at where the minimum price might be potentially a bit high. It helps you really identify that very quickly. A couple of questions here about pricing, and I think it's useful to talk about it now while we're talking about this section. So you're setting the base price. You're in charge of the base price. Beyond pricing is not pricing your property based on anyone else's pricing. It is using lots of factors to help adjust that base price. You talked about 5 billion data points earlier on, but that there is a bit of a misconception that dynamic pricing is using other people's prices to set your own, and that is definitely a well, I don't know what other tools do, but it's certainly not what yours does.
Yeah, and I think the way I like to think about this is before Beyond Pricing, the only data point you had were your competitors' prices. So it made sense to sort of see what the local competition were doing and adjust your rates accordingly. But what we found with that approach is that we don't know what data points that person is using to come up with their pricing strategy. So, you know, we have this phrase like, you wouldn't want to cheat off a D student. You know, perhaps you're all together like making poor pricing decisions. So that's what we really love about Beyond Pricing, is that we've embraced the power of the data. And so rather than say like, oh, everybody in this area is charging £200, we're going to make yours £195 to get booked first, or £205 to get booked last. We look at the demand trends in the market and see like when people are booking and what sort of inventory is left. And then we adjust your pricing accordingly.
So I think that's to answer, there's 2 or 3 questions, hopefully that answers that. It's using all sorts of factors, but you're ultimately in control of the pricing that you use. And it's really important differentiator for Beyond Pricing. So we've talked about base price. What about minimum price?
Yeah, great question. And to your point, Robert, this is another place where I love to see the impact that the minimum price is having on my suggested nightly rate. So the minimum price is completely up to you, but it's a really great safeguard to make sure that prices, you know, don't go too low, for example. You can set the minimum price to be whatever you want it to be. Let's say we were to set the minimum price here to £120. This means that we will never push a price to SuperControl that is less than £120 a night. Now, you know your property best, you know what your minimum price needs to be in order to make sure you're covering your costs. But for example, here, you can really easily see what impact having a minimum price of £120 has with a base price of £143. For most of the end of November and early December, and then all through January in low season here, we're essentially flat pricing. So rather than having room for the algorithm to move between weekday and weekend suggested prices or any day of the week, we're saying, okay, you don't want to take any less than £120 a night. We will never suggest lower than that. This is a trade-off though. This means that potentially it will be more difficult to get booked during these low demand periods, because if we switch this, what we're saying is actually we would love the minimum price to be down as low as 103, 109, 110 pounds through this time. So by pricing it at 120, we might be slightly overpriced and not be the people who are booked during those low demand periods. And just to jump ahead a little bit too, in SuperControl, I know a lot of people who use Beyond Pricing and SuperControl also use the minimum booking value in SuperControl. So the distinction here is in the minimum price in Beyond Pricing is by night, and then the minimum booking value is by booking, so for the entire reservation in SuperControl. So you can use the minimum price in Beyond Pricing to make sure that it's set at a certain level for each individual night. And then if you never wanted to accept a short break lower than £400, for example, if you set that in SuperControl, then that will also apply to any bookings, and no booking would be taken for less than £400.
Just to add to that as well, there's one or two questions. So if you've got minimum length of stay or changeover days, you only take bookings arriving on a Friday and a Monday, for example, all of that is still handled in SuperControl as it normally is. And Beyond Pricing is going to synchronize directly with all of those settings. So you're not suddenly opening yourself up to bookings you don't want. You may want to make a few tweaks as you move into dynamic pricing, but by and large, your business rules still apply.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We had a few questions earlier about that, Robert, and what the minimum stays look like. And so you can definitely continue to manage that as you have in the past in SuperControl, and it will all function as expected. And we also you have the ability to use short break pricing with dynamic pricing too. So actually, I'll just go back to our account here.
Yeah, I think it'd be useful to explain that. There's 2 or 3 questions about that. So by default, Beyond Pricing uses a nightly pricing model, but we've been working very closely with the team at Beyond Pricing on sort of examining the more traditional UK market and understanding that short breaks, actually, you can probably charge more money for them than the traditional, than the nightly pricing model. So we built this feature, which Jess will show us now, but sort of it's getting a perfect match between both worlds.
Exactly. So what you can do here is you can set, and we have some guidelines, but you can also set what you're accustomed to, or you can import it from your current percentages. You can set your short break pricing here, and it will work in line with Beyond Pricing. So I'll just set these. This is probably a bit higher, actually.
So there are a few questions I can see which relate to this kind of thing, and hopefully that answers you, seeing that you've got the facility to do this function where you can have more control over shorter stays, where effectively you can get away with charging more money than perhaps the nightly prices would add up to.
And this has been some great feedback from SuperControl users. In the US, it's much more common to have a large cleaning fee, for example, that covers a lot of your fixed costs and sort of inflates the price of short breaks. But that's not as common here. And so we've worked really hard with SuperControl and Robert to kind of come up with a way to accommodate short breaks with Beyond Pricing. So if you were to look, if we go back to November, for example, and we grab, you can see what our weekly rate would be. And so then if a short break were to check in on the 3rd, it would be based off of this weekly rate here that we're seeing in Beyond Pricing. So if your short break was set at 50% for a 2-night stay, rather than suggesting 220 pounds, sorry, it would be 50% of the 800 pounds. So it would be 400 pounds for the short break. Great. I'm going to keep going to talk more about the other elements that we have to control the pricing. So I'm going to jump into the Customize tab here. And so I want to talk about these minimum and maximum prices. So as we discussed, we've set our annual minimum price, but we can also set these seasonal minimum prices. So let's say, for example, you have you work with an owner, or traditionally in the past, you haven't wanted, let's say you own your property and you'll rent it for Christmas if somebody pays enough, but otherwise you like to go there with your family. So what you can do here is actually say, for Christmas, I'm going to set a seasonal minimum price that's higher than my regular price. I don't want to accept someone paying, you know, I want to make sure that the price is very high to make sure somebody wants to book it. So here we can set this, we can set the minimum price to £200 and click save. And so what this will do is, instead of let the pricing fluctuate up above and below the base price, it will not let the pricing go below £200 for those dates. So this is a way where you can also bump up the prices, but then also let it fluctuate above those rates if you wanted to. On the same side, I know it's come up about, you know, I like the term responsibly raising rates, and we can talk more about this too. But if, for example, you saw a date where we were seeing, let's say the marathon example I gave before. So at the moment, we're suggesting a price of £311. If you'd like where your base price is set, but you just think that's too high for that weekend, you can also set a seasonal maximum price. So you could come in here and say, for the weekend of the marathon, I actually never want the daily price to go above. I got £200 last year. I think it's unreasonable to ask for more than 250 in one go. I'm going to set my maximum price to 250 for this year. And so now that we've set those, if we come back here into the calendar view, and you can see here that the price is at £250. And if you hover over it, you can actually see the last line is showing you that it's lowered to your seasonal maximum price. And then if we come down here to Christmas, you can see that on the 31st, it's £207. But then for the rest of Christmas, it's actually been raised to our seasonal minimum price. So you can see that here in the last one too, we've raised the seasonal minimum price. So you can set both annual and seasonal, which is really powerful. And then another thing I want to talk about here, because this has come up in the questions too, is last minute discounts, but also future increases. So a few people have said, you know, I have guests booking the same weeks or looking to book the same week next year, and the prices are just incredibly high and I don't feel comfortable sharing these with the guest, or they get angry or frustrated when they see these. Part of this is because we do put these increases in automatically. So we'll automatically increase prices by 10% after 270 days and 30% after 390 days. And the reason being is this, you know, it's great to have repeat guests and to lock in bookings early. It's good to have that stability and those bookings on the calendar. But if somebody books a year in advance, they're removing your property from the potential group of properties that anybody looking to book in the next year is able to see. So in order to do that, they should have to pay a premium. And so this is why we add these increases in here for any bookings that are taken beyond kind of 270 and 390 days. If you want to remove these, it's really easy. You can just click on the X and then click save. And now we will no longer be increasing the pricing significantly after 390 days.
So some of these customization tools are there But as a Beyond Pricing user myself, I've never fiddled with these tools and done very, very well at a Beyond Pricing. And so I wouldn't, they're there. And then for maybe some people on the call will be very, very useful, but I wouldn't jump in immediately and start playing with the advanced tools. And I'm sure you would echo that as well. These are there for when you're actually getting quite well, for fine tuning rather than out of the box.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Robert. Like, this is what we found works generally. And so this is why we have this set as the default. But it was just interesting. Someone specifically said, my prices look 30% too high, more than 18 months out. So this was where I was able to highlight this. But yeah, it's a great point. This is based on trends that we see. Same thing with the discount here. You can see that we automatically decrease prices by 25% for the next 3 days and 10% for the next 7. And please keep in mind, this will never go below your minimum price. So you can actually see that if we head back to the calendar here. You can see that the last little line here is that it's lowered due to a decrease for the next 7 days, but it will never go below your minimum price. So that's really powerful too. And some people find, I don't know if you've adjusted this, Robert, I know you have larger properties. So some people, one adjustment some people do like to make is have a larger discount a little bit further in advance, because larger properties, well, in regular times when groups of people can plan to kind of be together in these properties, it usually takes a little bit more forward planning across a number of people. So the likelihood that they are booking 3 days out is pretty slim. So some people like to extend those discounts to kick in a little bit earlier, for example, to try and get those groups in there.
So I know from having spoken with a number of clients, and maybe some people on the call today will go in, it'll pull some prices through, they'll tweak it, and it might get a bit concerned that those prices are much higher than they expect. Now, we've obviously got a bit of an unusual year with COVID, and of course that super demand could be partly responsible for that. But where we've got people, especially with lots of repeat visitors coming back every year, and they're seeing a fairly significant increase in prices, my opinion is that that's an indication that you have been underpricing. Please don't be concerned that suddenly it looks like the prices are significantly higher. I don't know what feedback you'd have for people that maybe get a bit scared off when they start to see what kind of prices they potentially could be getting.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think with repeat guests, to your point, Robert, and somebody else brought this up too, like, you don't want to upset your customer base, but if you have been underpricing, or if you have been charging someone the same price for the last 5 years, for example, if they were to go and book accommodation elsewhere, it's highly likely that you would develop another repeat guest who's willing to pay that higher price. And so I think, catering, you worked hard to get those repeat guests, and catering to them is really important, but also understanding that you might be catering to one repeat guest at the expense of another repeat guest who's willing to pay those prices and is excited about staying in your apartment is really important. And I think as well that what happens is we'll see the pricing shift over time as demand trends shift over time. And so there's all sorts of people booking a holiday. There are people who plan a year in advance, or maybe 2 years in advance if they're organizing a wedding, through to people who, finish a big project and all of a sudden have time on their hands to take off work next week. And so you want to be able to cater to all of those people at different points in their journey with booking a holiday. So having, if you see that the prices are a little bit high now for December, for example, for Christmas, that's okay, because there are still so many people that will want to make bookings to go on holidays between now and Christmas. And you can lower yours and lock in that reservation now if you want to. But all that means is that when people like me are ready to go and look and book, your property won't be one of the ones that's available to me. So yeah, I encourage you to sort of within your comfort zone, maybe push it a little bit higher or let it go a little bit higher and just see what happens. Because sometimes that's the number one piece of feedback we get. Like people are often really surprised at the prices they are able to achieve for periods of high demand.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is really important to be comfortable with what you're doing, but please don't be scared off, because I think you'd be surprised that your guests will pay what the market rate is. There's a couple of questions here about how you define markets, which I know is a pretty unique feature in Beyond Pricing, and so it's definitely worth talking about that again, understanding. And I know that there's market data and nearby listings tabs in here, which are very interesting, but also it needs to be seen in context of how you define those markets.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Let's take a look at this market data. So yes, markets are we have large market. We have markets set for around the UK, so we cover the entirety of the UK. And then within those markets, we have what we call these hyperlocal groups or these hyperlocal clusters. And so these can vary in size. In Manhattan, for example, a cluster could be a few city blocks, whereas in other areas, it could be a wider geographical area. But basically what we're looking for is a statistically significant number of amount of information to see what the demand trends are in that region, to be able to accurately predict periods of higher and lower demand. And so to your point, Robert, this is what we surface here in regards to market data. And I just toggled off last year's occupancy because last year, this is why we surfaced 2 years now, because it'll be interesting to see where things head. But this is a great example back to the marathon. So here we can see in 2019 that occupancy for the marathon got to 83% of the market. So 83% of the listings of the properties in that local area were booked. And so what we're seeing this year, the date's a little bit different, but we can see that already 33% of properties in the area are booked. And so this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing this increase in demand and people booking ahead of time for this already. And we know based on historical data that the market will probably get close to 83% booked. So between now and then, there are still a lot of people who will be wanting to make bookings to come to this event. And so we're increasing your prices now automatically because of this increase in demand we're seeing in the future. So this is a great snapshot of how we look at it sort of on the market level. And then I think, did you mention stats, Robert, or nearby listings? Let's take a look at
nearby listings. I think it's interesting because I know a lot of people jump into that and maybe make some assumptions about what it means.
Yeah, I love looking at the nearby listings tab, but to Robert's point earlier, this is not your comp set. These are not the properties that we're looking at to come up with the suggested price. It's also not all the properties that are included in that hyperlocal cluster that I was just talking about. Rather, it is a selection of properties nearby. And the way I like to use this is to take a look at these properties and actually open it on Airbnb and see, okay, this is estimated. If they were using Beyond Pricing, their base price would be £149. Mine at the moment is at £143. How does my listing stack up? Their photos are pretty nice. What sort of amenities do they have? Do they have a hot tub? And this is the way you can see, kind of compare where your listing sits to those around you to get a better understanding of what your base price might be and just to see what the competition looks like. But it's really important to know that these are not the properties that are being factored into your pricing. And this price here is also not being used to determine anything to do with your specific pricing. It's just kind of surfacing some additional information for other people in the area. Whether they should or not, some people use this to see what others are doing and then go and offer to manage their properties for them. So it could be a good way to, see some underperforming listings in your area and perhaps offer to co-host, for example. You can also see these on Verbo too, if you're interested.
Let's assume we've now set some prices, we're happy. What do we do now at this point in time? As I said earlier, this is entirely separate to SuperControl. It's pulling data from SuperControl, but not pushing anything back. So what do we do to start sending prices? And I know there was a question right at the beginning about, doesn't seem to have pulled through to SuperControl. So just highlight how you would know that it was set to send pricing, to synchronize pricing.
Yeah, great point. Okay, cool. So here we are going to click Start Pricing on this listing. And here you can see that price posting is on. And if we go back here to the dashboard, I'm also going to turn one on for my SuperControl property. So if you're in the dashboard here too, you can click here and say Enable Price Posting upon save. Great. And so then what you can see here is that price posting is on. I'm just going to refresh this page. And so here you can see this was successfully posted 9 months ago. So if we give it a few minutes, this information will feed through to our SuperControl account, and we'll be able to see here that price posting is on. And then when you click into the property too, you'll be able to see the last time we successfully posted prices. And this will also show in red if there are ever any issues with posting prices to your SuperControl account. Happens very rarely, but it is surfaced here in case we need to make any adjustments.
And so it's just important to note that it isn't an immediate synchronization. It will take a few minutes to appear in SuperControl. And then after that, there's a new synchronization every night. So through the night, prices would change. And Jess, if you could go back to your SuperControl tab, you would, in your browser, you can see there that we're showing the last update that prices came through within SuperControl on that table there. And if you want to, there's a log of all of the prices that they have ever sent. If you change to use the percentage model that we've got here, it won't change your prices until the next price sync from Beyond Pricing. So just changing that is not going to immediately change things. It will need another sync. So either you need to trigger that manually or just wait until the following morning.
And that's a great point, Robert. We'll push the information to SuperControl and the rates, and then it will be distributed to the channels from there. And then similarly, if you receive a booking on Airbnb, for example, this information has to go back into SuperControl and then be fed through to Beyond Pricing, pardon me. So if you ever receive a booking and it's not immediately reflected in Beyond Pricing, that's quite common. We prioritize pushing updated pricing to SuperControl. So anytime that you make a change to your base price or your minimum price or your discounting schema, for example, we will trigger pushing that update to SuperControl immediately, and it should be reflected within a few minutes. And then anytime we prioritize pushing pricing, and then the next level of prioritization is pulling in existing bookings. So if you received a booking that wasn't shown in your account, for example, you can come here to your connected accounts and refresh the connection. And this would trigger grabbing that information from SuperControl and bringing it and reflecting it in your Beyond Pricing account. It doesn't have an impact on the suggested pricing that we suggest, but if you're ever curious as to how long that takes, if you don't refresh the account, it updates daily. So yeah, that's how you see that information.
Thank you everyone for the questions that you've sent through. I'm still sort of trying to read them and ask them, get through as many as possible. But I think by and large, we've probably covered off most things that have been asked one way or another at the moment. There's a question about, well, there are one or two questions about occupancy-based pricing. So if you do have a large property and you want to incentivize smaller groups, you can still use the occupancy discounting feature in SuperControl to manage those occupancy prices. We have found that some clients that move to Beyond Pricing, who previously thought it was very important to have occupancy-based discounts, were then able to abandon those because it was more about getting the right price at the right time than perhaps incentivizing for sizes. But I do completely understand, especially with group size limitations around COVID, it's still desirable to potentially have occupancy-based discounts, so you can manage that still within SuperControl as you normally would. There was a question about pounds prices versus euro prices. Yes, it's in pounds. We've just pulled through some stuff in Beyond Pricing, but it will be in your currency.
Yeah, actually, just on that note, Robert, sorry, and just to clarify, you can pick a currency to be charged in, but if you did have a property that was listed in pounds and then another property somewhere else in Europe that was listed in euros, whatever you currently have that set up in, we will pull that information through from SuperControl and would display it in Beyond Pricing. So you can pick a currency to be charged in and others to display in.
There were a couple of questions about distributing prices. So Beyond Pricing sends the prices to SuperControl, and then with any of your integrated channels, we would then send those prices on. So Airbnb, Booking.com, or other channels would automatically be updated from SuperControl. If you choose to add an uplift for those channels to cover commissions or because you feel you can get more from certain channels, then that would be applied on top. In addition, any booking fees, for example, that you have configured in SuperControl would also be added to the prices as normal. So yeah, rent is coming through from Beyond Pricing. Anything on top of that that you have configured in SuperControl would automatically be applied. And that's all the channels where we update prices. Obviously, some channels we don't update prices with, so that you're still going to need to manually manage those. But most connected channels we have full price integration, so it would pull through automatically.
That's great. A few people have asked, Robert, I saw, or had asked previously about pricing beyond 12 months and beyond 365 days. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. Pre-COVID, in general, we recommended that people didn't price beyond 365 days, where, if possible. The reason being is, we know where school holidays are going to fall every year, for example. But let's say a new festival comes to town and we don't have any historical information on the demand trends we've seen around this in the past. So it's harder to predict what is coming kind of down the pipe more than a year in advance. A lot of hotels only take bookings a year in advance as well. Having said that, I know I work with quite a few SuperControl customers who whose properties doubles as a wedding venue or is right next door to a large wedding venue, and people plan those sorts of things, 2 years in advance. So we do have the capability to open calendars beyond 365 days. So if that's something you're interested in, you can just email support@beyondpricing.com and they'll be able to action that for you. But the reason it's not there by default is because we don't encourage then just like opening up your calendars for 2 years on your website and on Airbnb, for example. If possible, we recommend keeping that availability open for a year or less, but then you can have access to that pricing in SuperControl for, to take those bookings far in advance as needed.
Yeah, and certainly my own experience with Beyond Pricing has shown it sort of changes. When we onboarded, this was more than 18 months ago with my own properties, we were taking fewer bookings well ahead, but we soon got used to that change in booking patterns. So there's a little bit, maybe when you onboard, you might see a reduction in bookings just because it's pushing them into a slightly different window, but it really is nothing to worry about. It's just that it's optimizing the rates you're getting for bookings rather than just spreading them out over a longer period.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Like, that is really scary at first, you know, because if you're accustomed to booking up far in advance, then it feels good to have that security of those bookings in. But what we see in a city like San Francisco, for example, pre-COVID, but 50% of bookings actually come in within a month to stay. So if you have all of your available days booked up now for April, there are 50% of people who are looking to book between now and their stay haven't even started looking yet. And so we see different trends in different markets, but that is one thing that we do see across the board as people sort of embrace beyond pricing, that their booking lead time will decrease. And it's not a bad thing, because back to my point earlier, you know, if your property is booked up well in advance, it's removed from the pool of potential properties for anybody looking. So to have a good balance of some, you know, good bookings in the future, but also enough availability that your property is available when the majority of people who are looking to go on holidays are booking for that time frame is really important.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of questions. The free trial, you offer a free trial. When does that commence? From when you open the account or when you start synchronizing prices? As I said earlier, you can see everything and do everything without costing you anything, but it might be good to explain that.
Yeah, great question. It starts from the moment you enable syncing for the first property. So to Robert's point, you could create an account, log in, connect your SuperControl, play around with all the prices, and the free trial will not start until you actually, click that sync prices button to get going.
Thank you. There's a question here, does the calendar open a year ahead on a rolling basis? So you can configure things in Beyond Pricing, but also in SuperControl. So we have a protection about how far ahead you want to book to. Typically, that would be set to be the one and the same thing. So it would always push forward to your most distant price, but you could potentially have a difference between those two. But yeah, you would be looking to go 12, 18, 24 months ahead, whatever is right for your properties.
Yes, and it would be rolling. So like tomorrow we would see the price for the 24th of March, 2022, sorry.
One of the things which comes up time and time again is pricing is a job that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and perhaps maybe not everyone's putting the time and effort into it that they should, and so they're not they're aware that their pricing isn't as good as it could be. Doing it with Beyond Pricing is one of the key things, is the time saving. Once you've configured this, you're not leaving it alone entirely, but you are not having to do this very often. So the fact that it's doing your pricing every day based off 5 billion data points, I love that number. It is doing a really good job that you don't have to. I just wanted, before we get to the end, to point out that there are another couple of sort of Q&A and optimization webinars coming up in the next week or two. So we're Beyond Pricing will be digging deeper. So any of you that take your first steps today or have additional questions, there are more opportunities to have additional feedback and get more questions answered, and actually maybe dig into some of the more advanced features of Beyond Pricing and in combination with SuperControl as well. So please watch out for those and join them. Register if you want to get that extra insight. Any other questions? Obviously, please just contact the Beyond Pricing team or our support team, and we'll be delighted to help you through whatever stage you're at with setting up and getting integrated. I'm just checking to see if there's only one or two last questions, but I think there's a good question actually from Vicky at the end. Is there an information sheet explaining each step? Yes, there is really good documentation available both in the Beyond Pricing website and in the SuperControl website, showing step by step, including some really useful information on those short break percentages that we explained earlier on. So go to the Beyond Pricing website to the support section, and you'll find the SuperControl documentation there, as well as some additional stuff in our own help center.
Yeah, perfect. You can click here and go straight there to support. And if you just search SuperControl, all the information Robert is referencing will show.
Brilliant. So we better close out now. It's come to time. So thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everybody for joining. It's been really useful. And as I say, if you've got any questions, we're still here to ask, but look out for those additional webinars in the next week or so.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Robert. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye.